Hi, my name is Niall Boylan. Of course, you know me from the radio station. I'm talking to people every single day, and you know what? They're sick of the government. I love this city. I love Ireland. I love the crack. I love the cave meal of Fáilte that it's offered us for thousands of years. But we need change. And over the last 4 years in particular, I've noticed those callers are getting angrier and very frustrated because they feel voiceless. They're listening to a government who are not listening to them. An opposition party who don't seem to oppose. They've ignored us on so many things, so many important issues. They've ignored us on mass immigration with a reckless immigration policy. They've ignored us on healthcare with waiting lists getting longer. There's 4,000 children in temporary accommodation as the homeless numbers rise and rise in this country. But what have they done about it? What have they actually done? They've made promises but done nothing. Our business communities are suffering with closures every single day caused by skyrocketing energy costs and a government that refuses to reduce the VAT rate back to 9% to help those businesses stay open. And many people say they don't feel safe in our city, with crime figures that seem to be getting worse every single day. And that's why I'm here. You can see the doll in the background. And remember, in that building in the doll in the background, very few of those people are actually listening to you. But some people are listening. Michael Collins, Michael Fitzmaurice, and Richard O'Donoghue, Independent Ireland. And that's why I've decided to run as a European MEP and be the real voice of Dublin for Independent Ireland, for honesty, integrity, and real common sense. I'm not a politician. In fact, I'm not even part of the establishment. But I think that's what we really need. We need real change. And we need people to stand up and be counted and represent the people of Dublin. I'm a proud Dubliner. I'm a proud Irishman. I'm a good listener. And I'll speak honestly and openly for you, the people of Dublin and the people of Ireland. So please vote for me, Niall Boylan, on the 7th of June, and I'll be the real voice of Dublin and the real voice of Ireland in Europe.
It is very good afternoon. It's Niall Boylan with you for the next hour or so. I do want to talk about voting abroad. I got a very interesting message from a guy who's living in Boston with his family for the last 3 years, and he's quite angry. He said he came home to vote in the last referendum because he was coming home with his business anyway, but he feels he should be able to vote abroad. Now, we don't know the exact number of Irish citizens abroad. Look, if we're talking about expats, it could be between 60 and 80 million. But realistically, holding an Irish passport and being a citizen is the one thing that should entitle you to vote. We're very unique in this country. We're one of only 3 countries in Europe that don't allow you to vote abroad. But there could be anywhere up to 2 million people holding an Irish passport anywhere in the world at this present time. So that would definitely affect the voting when it comes to particularly referendums. So should we allow Irish people to vote abroad? That's the question I'm asking today, and I want you to text on 085 100 22 55. That's 085 100 22 55. There's an argument for that they're Irish citizens and they should be involved, in what happens in this country. But the argument against is, well, they pissed off, didn't they? I mean, they don't really care, and that doesn't really affect them if they're going to stay in Spain or America or other parts of Europe or whatever it happens to be. The referendum choices or the general election choices for 5 years are probably not going to affect them. So why should they be allowed to vote? So there are 2 arguments for this. Now, voting is very important, of course, and on June the 7th, you are going to have an opportunity in this country to vote not only in the EU elections, but because you heard my ad at the start, of course, that's the joys of doing a podcast. I don't have to be impartial. But you can also vote in the local elections too for your local councillors. And of course, before the end of the year, most likely in November, I would imagine, you're going to have an opportunity to change the government of this country, where you will vote in a general election. But how do you vote? Because people think, well, it's an easy thing, isn't it? You just walk in, you just tick your box or whatever, write your number down, and it's that simple. But it's not really that simple, and there's a lot of myths going around. So let's just try and dispel some of these myths today. John McGurk joins me from Grip Media. John, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Niall. How are you?
John, now you wrote a piece. What kind of drove you to write the piece that you wrote in Grip with the local and EU elections, a guide to using your vote? There are myths going around, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people really just don't seem to understand how to cast their vote. I saw one of your fellow candidates in Ireland South the other day. I know you're not running in Ireland South, you're running in Dublin. But he posted this tweet in which he said, I want you to vote for me 1, and then he named another candidate number 2, and then give no transfers after that because you're only helping other people get elected. And that's just completely wrong. And it says to me, if you're a candidate and you're telling people stuff like that and you don't understand how the voting system works, then you probably shouldn't be running. So how the voting system works is as follows, Niall. We use a system called single transferable vote. That means that you have one vote, but it can transfer between candidates. And you're asked on the ballot paper to rank the candidates in order of your preference. So that means that if for argument's sake, Niall Boylan is your favourite candidate, you give him your number 1. I'm sure you won't contradict me in saying that. But then,
but I know you have your impartiality. So if you want to call Niall Boylan Joe Blogs, I don't mind. But remember, Niall Boylan is Joe Blogs.
But whoever your candidate is, you vote for them number 1, and then you might have somebody who you like but not quite as much, and you give them a number 2, and you keep going. You can go the whole way down the ballot, or you can stop when you don't care anymore. But what's really important to know is that when your vote is actually being counted in the count centre, the person who will get your vote is always the person who is the highest ranked person on your ballot paper who is still in contention. So let's say you vote for Joe Bloggs number 1 and Joe Bloggs is eliminated on the first count. He doesn't get enough votes to proceed. He's the bottom ranked candidate. Your next preference, your second preference, will then get that vote and it will be counted the exact same as if it was a number 1. And then if your second preference goes out, it goes to your third preference. And that vote will only go to the highest ranked person on your ballot paper who is still in the election. That's really important. So sometimes I hear people say things like, Simon Harris got elected on the 15th count and your 9th preference could elect Simon Harris. That is true, but it's only true if you have given Simon Harris a higher preference on your ballot paper than somebody else who's still in the election, and nobody higher than that is still in the election. So that's really important to know. You can't accidentally elect Simon Harris or indeed Niall Boylan or indeed John McGurk by ranking us number 11 and saying, I didn't intend to elect them, it was accidentally done. That's not how it works. That person only gets your vote if there's somebody else who you actually thought, I prefer Simon Harris or John McGurk or Niall Boylan to that person. So that's really important to understand.
Okay, so this myth that goes around that, I'm going to go in and let's say I want to vote for Niall Boylan, right? And I want to I don't want anyone else to get the position, so I'm not going to vote for anyone else. And then people say, no, don't do that, because if you don't put anyone else down your sheet, the government gets your vote. And that's a kind of myth that's being perpetrated as well at the moment.
Yeah, that's complete rubbish. So, candidates can only get your vote if you've put somebody below them on the ballot paper. So the best way to think about this is it's always a contest between two people, right? So when you vote, say, Joe Bloggs 1 and Josephine Bloggs 2, Joe Bloggs gets your vote, but it's ahead of the number 2 person. And then when the number 1 person goes out, your vote goes to the number 2 person, and she's in a competition with the number 3 person, and so on and so forth. So it's always ranking one person ahead of another. So how I vote often is I will go down. I'm voting in Ireland South this time. I think there are 23 candidates on the ballot paper. I already
25,
know who my top
I think,
three are
actually.
going to be.
I think it's 25. There's a record now at this stage, isn't there? 25 candidates in the South.
25.
Yeah,
There
for
are
5
too many.
seats.
So I think I'm not going to vote the whole way down for the first time in my life. But
yeah.
I already know, let's say, who my top 3 are going to be. And I already know who the next 3 after that are going to be.
Are you going to tell us?
And then probably... no, because then I'd be shot, wouldn't I? But then I'll tell you. Then I'm probably going to go through. After that, it'll be any independent who I haven't already voted for will be getting my vote after my top 6, say. And then I look at who's left on the ballot paper. And what I usually do in that situation, just fixing my headphones now, is I will decide, who do I not want to get elected? And so, for example, and this won't be a secret to anyone who reads what I write, I'll always put a bunch of people in before the people before profit candidate. Because as far as I'm concerned, if it comes down to that last seat and it's a choice between, say, a Fianna Fáil candidate and a people before profit candidate, I actually do care who wins that seat. I'd much prefer to have a sort of centrist politician in that seat than the people before profit guy. So that's how to think about it. You're not, and if that case, my vote might actually be used to elect a Fianna Fáiler, but that will only happen if all the people I voted way ahead of him have already been elected or
Yeah, in other words,
eliminated,
it's
or
unlikely
otherwise
that the
lose it.
Fianna Fáil will ever get your vote. In other words, in that point,
Yeah.
it's unlikely they'll ever get it. So you're going to fill the whole sheet. So, I mean, is it ever advisable just to put one down? So, in other words, put number one down beside Niall Boylan or Joe Bloggs. Is that ever advisable just to do that?
Well, it's legal. That's the first thing to say. Your vote is valid so long as there is a clear first preference. But the important thing to remember is that your first preference is literally only counted in the first count. So if I mark Joe Bloggs number one on my ballot paper, then that goes into his pile on the first count. And if he's elected on the first count, great. Or if he's in contention the whole way through, great. But if he happens to get only, say, 20 votes and he's eliminated on the first count, then basically your say over the rest of the election goes with it. You no longer have a say because you haven't said, well, if my guy doesn't get it, this is who I want to get it instead. And that's the option your vote gives you. And if you're entirely free and you're within your rights not to choose that option, but understand why you're doing that. If you're doing it because you think choosing other options will somehow help, candidates you don't like get elected, then that's just wrong. If you're doing it because you genuinely only like one guy and genuinely couldn't care who else gets elected, then that's fine. But don't do it because you misunderstand the vote.
And your preferences for second, third and fourth. So let's say you vote for your Joe Bloggs at number one and the quota, say, for the EU elections. Let's say it's 70,000 votes based on how many people vote, how many candidates there are, how many seats, there's 4 seats. So your Joe Bloggs gets 110,000 votes. So now we have 40,000 votes spare. So those particular votes, are they going to then go to the second preferences then, on that sheet, because Joe Bloggs has already got through. He's got his seat, he's covered, he's got a 70,000 plus one vote. So those second and third preferences, is that where they come in valuable as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what's called a surplus. So I'm going to explain this very quickly so that people understand how this works technically. In order to get elected in in proportional representational single transferable vote, you have to achieve as a candidate something called the quota. This is basically a mathematical formula of votes that would say you're guaranteed to fulfill proportionately 1/4 of the electorate if there's 4 seats, or 1/5 of it if there's 5. So basically that formula is the total number of valid votes cast divided by the total number of seats plus 1, and with 1 vote added on. You don't really need to understand it, but that's what the quota is. But if a candidate gets over the quota, then they are said to have a surplus. And those additional votes, so in your example, the quota is 70,000, somebody gets 110,000. Those additional 40,000 votes are then available to be transferred. Now, how are those votes chosen? How do you know which of the 110,000 votes become the 40,000 votes that are transferred? They literally just pick the top 40,000 votes off the pile. So it's a completely random order. It depends on what order the boxes are counted in and all the rest of it. And the reason they do that, Niall, is very simple. Because if they do it any other way, they could actually impact preferences later on in the count. So your they could distort third preferences and fourth preferences and so on. So what they do is they just pick a random sample of votes. And people think, oh, is that fair? It actually is fair, because if you think of, let's say 110,000 people vote for, Joe Bloggs, they are likely, if they're all agreed on the first candidate they're voting for, they are likely to have a substantial consensus for their second and third preferences. People are very similar. And also, out of any sample of 110,000 votes, 40,000 is statistically representative. So that's why they do that. If you're not one of those votes that's selected, then your vote just goes. That's it. You've elected your candidate and you've had that right, and then move on. The surplus is only distributed if it can make a difference between the last 2 candidates at the bottom. So, for example, if I'm coming last and I have 1,000 votes, and then there is somebody who is coming second last and they have 2,000 votes, distributing that surplus could jump me ahead of the person who's not coming last and keep me in the race. So that's how it works.
In relation to what we're talking about today, by the way, just your own personal view, and I don't know if you've ever written on this in the past. I know many of the papers have, because there was a suggestion back in 2019, I think it came up in the Oireachtas. There was a bill proposed or put forward for the Irish voting abroad. We still are we're reasonably unique, one of 3 countries who don't allow it in Europe. And we do have a big diaspora, of course, across the world. Now, whether they still hold Irish passports or not is a different kettle of fish. It's hard, and I've Googled it and Googled it and Googled it to get an actual figure of the amount of people who hold an Irish passport around the world. The figure is anywhere between 1 and 3 million. The figure, by the way, of the Irish diaspora is 60 to 80 million, but 1 and 3 million, which could make have a very different result on an EU election or on a By the way, if you're from the EU, you can vote anywhere in the EU elections, by the way. But if you're if it's a general election or referendum or presidential election, it could make a very big difference having an extra 1.5, 2 million votes. So do you believe they should be allowed to vote?
No, absolutely not. I'll tell you why. It's very simple. If I go out and vote in these local elections for my local councillor, and my local councillor is terrible, and I've made a terrible mistake, and I've elected somebody who's a terrible local councillor, then I have to live with that. I actually bear the consequences of it. I have to look at the bad roads and the crappy playgrounds and all the bad decisions that person made. But if somebody in America, somebody living in Florida, I don't care if maybe they're from here originally, but they're living with their wife and kids in Florida, and they have an Irish passport, and they say, "Oh, I'll just vote in the Irish local elections," and they elect a councillor. They don't have to live with the consequences of their decision now. They don't have to live in a country. Let's say,
but they will argue. They will argue.
No, let me finish the point. Imagine at the last election, you had a big campaign to let people from overseas vote, and you had 1 million Americans who decided to vote for the Green Party, and they don't have to live with the consequences of those decisions, but Irish people do, or Irish people living in America don't live with the consequences of those decisions. Is that fair? I don't think it's fair. I think if you're going to vote, you should have to live with the consequences of your vote. And if you don't have to live with the consequences of your vote, bugger off and vote somewhere else where you do have to live with the consequences of your vote.
And you know what? I completely agree with you. But in the absence of impartiality, I'm giving you the alternate argument. And the alternate argument that I've heard from listeners when I've talked about it on the radio is, that they might not always be in Spain. They might not always be in Belgium or in America or whatever it is. And their children may want to move back home. And if it's a referendum or a general election, leaving aside local elections, because you are right, they're more local issues. But leaving aside that, in a general election, it's a 5-year term. They may want to come back during that 5 years. So those things that they vote for may have, an effect on their lives in the next 5 years, or the next generation of their family, or their kids who may want to move back to Ireland. So they'll argue that, they still should have an input into how Ireland is being run.
Yeah, I hear that argument, and I sympathise with it, and I still don't agree, because let's say Grips decided to make me North American correspondent starting in January next year, and told me I was going to be living in Washington, covering the White House for the next 5 years. Should I then have a vote in the American presidential election because I'll have to live with it next year? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think if you make a decision to move to another country at some point in your life, more power to you. That is absolutely your right and decision. But I don't think you should then be voting from overseas.
But we allow foreign people, and people actually this year they've been plugging it a lot actually in relation to Ukrainians and asylum seekers to vote in Irish elections. Now I know they can vote in the local elections.
I'd be consistent with you, Niall. I also don't agree with that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that in the case of, and I mean, I absolutely understand why Ukrainian people are here, and I'm not against them being here, but I don't think they should be voting because they're here on temporary residency, and the idea is that the majority of them will be going home when the war is over. So they also won't be living with the consequences, if everything goes well, of the decisions they make in our local elections. I think there is actually an argument that if you're living here and you're a permanent resident and you're not a citizen, but you're a permanent resident and you do have to live with the consequences you make with the decisions you make in local elections, and that's what the system is based on in theory, there's an argument for that. But this business of letting anybody vote just because they live in the locality and we don't know whether they're here or have a long-term commitment to the country, I don't agree with that either. I think voting should primarily be for Irish citizens in Irish elections, and that is the same. Who are resident
in Ireland.
Make the decisions actually have to live with.
All right, well, listen, John, thank you very much indeed. I hope people find it a little bit clearer now. So basically, go down, take the whole tally sheet. By the way, just to remind people, in this election in June, you will get 2 sheets. You'll get one for the local election and one for the European elections. You'll probably see my name probably up the top somewhere because it goes in alphabetical order as far as I know. So I'll be up there with Lynn Boyle and probably Regina Doherty will be after me because she's D. So that's probably the way the ballot sheet will look. You'll see a little photograph of everybody. Be very clear about how you vote. Don't just look at a name. Make sure the photograph tallies with the name, it's the person you recognise, etc., etc. And as John says, the suggestion is go down the sheet and give a preference to those you believe. So if you want me to be elected, obviously vote for me first, but if there's somebody else after me or somebody else after that, you think, well, look, if he doesn't get elected, I'd like him to be elected, go down the sheet. But you don't have to go down it all the way. This idea that the government will get your vote afterwards is simply untrue, and I hope we've made that abundantly clear today. John, thank you very much indeed for coming on, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And you can find more of that information, by the way, if you look at the whole thing that John wrote, which is a very interesting piece. It's on Grip Media. It's called The Local and EU Elections, a Guide to Using Your Vote. John, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Niall.
There you go, John McGurk from Grip Media. Now, we got to take a quick break. That's what I got to do. Back in a second.
The multi-award-winning Niall Boylan Podcast. Live every day and available for download from all your usual platforms. Niall Boylan has been told...
he's going to keep talking, isn't he? Yeah, okay. I couldn't be listening to him now. I couldn't be dealing with that. Now, if you want to give us a call, you can, by the way. The number is 085 100 2255. That's 085 100 2255. Sorry about that. We got lots of WhatsApp messages in, by the way, in this. I'm going to come to Morris and Nuala in a second. We got some WhatsApp messages that I'm going to play for you as well in a few minutes' time. I want to know what you think. Should Irish people abroad be allowed to vote in elections? Do you believe postal votes should be allowed? Let me go first, if I can, to Morris. Morris, hi, how are you?
Zone bot.
Oh, sorry. Morris, hi, how are you?
Good, thanks, Niall.
All a bit confusing there for a second. Morris, I mean, there is two arguments on this, and John makes a really good argument that if you're living in America, like our person who sent in the email, and I read it out very quickly to you. I listen to your podcast from Boston every day, and I miss home so much, but I'm kind of glad I'm not there at the moment the way things are going. I moved here with my kids 3 years ago because of the work and the fact that Ireland has just got too expensive. My work took me here. Anyway, I was back in Ireland for the last referendum, and I voted, and I'd love to be able to vote for a few locals in my hometown in the local elections in June, but I can't make it home. I think it's wrong that I'm Irish, one of only 3 countries in Europe that don't allow people to vote abroad. And I should be allowed to vote. I'm not sure what your listeners think, but I believe the law should be changed. Morris, do you believe the law should be changed?
No. And the reason I have that opinion is because, you know, he's left. No matter what government comes in relation to the Republic, unless he's living in Ireland, he won't be affected. And it's not fair on the people who have to live with the consequences of whatever way the election goes. Because, you know, if it was a hard left government that comes in, we could be hit with all sorts of tax increases and maybe new taxes like a wealth tax that a lot of the hard left people for profit love to talk about.
Well, Sinn Féin are looking for that as well, aren't they? Over a certain, they want to bring a new tax.
My ex-girlfriend was from Germany, and she was, when we were together, it was around the time of the German federal elections. And, you know, her and her parents, who are living in Wexford, still, you know, they were sent, I think they were able to vote in the federal elections in Germany. I'm not sure, is that the only election they're able to do, or can they also vote in their state elections? But I knew, anyway, they were able to vote in the federal. But, you know, German diaspora is very small, whereas in Ireland's case, you know, there's a lot of people, like if you include people who, let's say, are in their 80s that left Ireland in the 50s, let's say, and their children and grandchildren who possibly could hold Ireland.
That's 1.2 million people in America alone, by the way. Can I just point out?
So, like if there's any hard left people listening, and you know we're in favour of allowing all those people to vote for, I can tell you one thing: in relation to marriage equality and all of those sort of things, which I did vote no on. You know, those people tend to be more conservative than the people who stayed in the country.
I don't know, because, I mean, when you look at the marriage equality referendum or the abortion referendum, which are two interesting ones, particularly the marriage equality, a lot of people, young people, came home from Australia and Spain and everywhere to vote in that election. And that made up a fair percentage of that vote, which was 67% of those who voted. So,
but they left a few years ago. Like I'm talking.
Oh no, I agree. No, I'm agreeing with you. But what I'm saying to you is, it can make a difference on both sides, depending on what the referendum or the general election is. It can make a difference on both sides. I mean, you're now seeing Regina Doherty, for example, looking, you know, to get 16-year-olds voting. That's another 180,000 votes, 16 and 17-year-olds, which is ridiculous. But in saying that, I mean, an extra couple of million people in a small country like Ireland, which we only have, whatever it is, 5.2 million people in this country, roughly half of those might go out and vote. So an extra 2 million people can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and like when you talk about Germany, for instance, Germany has a population of about the guts of 90 million, and there's only maybe a few million Germans spread out in the world. So like those Germans outside of Germany aren't going to spew it.
I get the point you're making. Yeah, we've always had a very transient population who leave the country because it's a small country, and we did tend to populate the world quite a lot. That's come down, by the way, over the last 10 years. this, the way we kind of spread our seed around the world, it has come down because, of course, we're having less children now. We're at 1.7 children now, whereas before we would have been 4 or 5 children on average if you go back 30 years ago. So a lot of people left the country. But now that's not the case as much anymore. Anyway, but stay there. Morris thinks no, it would be the wrong idea. Let me just go to, I think Nuala is next. Nuala, hi, how are you?
I'm not too bad at all, and I'm just after a call. I make the call to the Electoral Commission because, I had to ring them twice before I got anybody. But anyway, my point really is that if I want to register to vote, according to legislation, I must register for my ordinary residence, which would be, and that in legislation would mean that I would have to be living here for 6 months.
Yeah.
That's in the legislation. But I was saying to the guy on the Electoral Commission, I said, but it doesn't, if I register online, I'm not asked for proof of address, which I should be. If I want to buy a mobile phone, I have to give proof of address. Now, I have a bee in my bonnet about this because...
The only thing they require is your passport or your RSI number, your tax number. Yeah.
It was just your pass number. Say, it doesn't prove that you live here. Like, I could...
Well, it does prove you're a citizen. It does actually prove you're a citizen.
It does prove... that's true, but, it doesn't prove that you're living actually where you're living.
But when you register to vote, you have to provide proof that you're Irish first, okay? So you need to give either your passport number or... I'm not too sure, it's been a long time since I've done it myself, but you have to give your passport number and you have to give your address. Now, you can only register once, but now here's the complication, and I know what you're going to say in a second, Nuala. If you move... you can then be registered in 2 areas. And I know in the last elections there was a few problems with people who had 2 votes or 3 votes in some cases, which is a big problem. But they are trying to fix that by having one database. The problem is, up to now, we've had many databases. So you've had Fingal, you have all the different databases around, right? But they're now combining them all into one database, which should fix that problem.
I don't think it will, because in the first place, you can't knock off those who are already registered without any of that.
Yeah, but if they do, but the Electoral Commission did say in the last referendum that they're combining it. It might take another 6 months, but they're combining it all into one database, which means there then won't be duplicates. So you'll have your RSI number, your date of birth.
There will be.
You know what I mean?
But there will be duplicates. There will be duplicates because I could be still... Now, I've lived out in Roundstone for 10 years, way back in the 80s. I could be still on that register out there, which is in the county. I don't know if I am.
No, but this is the point I'm making. No, this is the point I'm making. But they won't be able to duplicate it. But you won't, once they get the new database sorted out, and they are doing that, you won't have 26 counties basically having different databases. You'll have it all in one database, which means that Nuala with such and such an RSI number and such a date of birth will only be on it once. So there'll be one address, and that'll be it.
But you see, they won't be able to knock me off out in Roundstone because I'm not, if I'm out in there, because I'm not registered with anything, and they can't knock somebody off just because they're not registered with the PPS number. And suppose all this Ted Murphy out in Castlegar, and his son is Ted Murphy, and then one of them registers and the other one doesn't register. He can't be knocked off. You can't knock off anybody.
Well, that sounds complicated, but I know that they are trying. They're very well aware of that problem because it came up in the last referendum. So they are very well aware of the situation.
If they were sincere and wanted to do this right, it should be taken, which wouldn't demand, I think, a referendum. There should be the central database should be either under revenue or under the Department of Social Welfare. The Department of Social Welfare knows exactly what PPS numbers are live, because there's a million PPS numbers for people coming in and out of the country who would have registered and went off back to Poland or somewhere like that. So you have millions
Well, look, that is another issue, Nuala, and I will try and get somebody from the Electoral Commission to answer that question, and it is another issue. But in relation to the question we're talking about today, do you believe this guy who moved to America 3 years ago and lives there should be allowed to vote in Ireland?
No, I don't think so, because, you see, he's not paying any tax in Ireland. Now, you see, the thing is, like, people would say, when I say that to somebody, they said, "Oh well, I'm not working now, so I don't pay tax." And I said, "Well, you pay tax on your phone bill, you pay tax on your alcohol you buy, you pay tax on everything. But if you're not paying, like I think in America, or US people sometimes if they're abroad, they still pay tax to America."
Mm. It depends. It depends on how long, how many months of the year they're in America, etc., etc. It's very complicated.
Yeah. But I mean, why should you have a say? Why should somebody that hasn't lived in the country for 30 years have a say in who gets elected in the local government in Galway? Sure, they don't even know them people. And
Okay,
sometimes I don't even know half the candidates myself.
So yeah, I wouldn't know them either. So let's say it's somebody you shouldn't be allowed to vote in local elections. Fair enough. I get that, and I agree with John. And I agree with you. But if, say, a general election or a referendum, which is something that shapes the country, and they might say to you, well, why shouldn't I be allowed to vote? My kids might want to live there, you know what I mean? Or my relations live there. And, surely I'm an Irish citizen. I should be allowed to vote.
Well, that's supposing three men were frozen, that kind of thing. It's not reality. The reality is this: if you're living in a country and you're paying your tax or you're sending your kids to school, you should be the one to have the biggest say, not somebody that has decided to go off because they want an adventure and go to Bangkok or somewhere.
Okay, we'll stay there for a second, Nuala. John, how you doing? John?
Niall, you're looking for me, yeah?
I am indeed. John, Nuala says absolutely not. You shouldn't be allowed to vote if you pissed off, basically, and you want to go on an adventure across the world. You shouldn't be allowed to vote.
Well, if you're living abroad permanently, possibly no.
What does permanently mean? Is that 2 years, 1 year, 6 years, 10 years? What's permanently mean?
I would look at 4 or 5 years or whatever. You've kind of moved away, and you're
okay.
living
Well, let's talk about the guy that sent the message into us. He's in Boston 3 years now with his family, and he wants the right to vote in Ireland. Should he be allowed to?
Well, the other thing is, Niall, we have such a huge diaspora. If we included everybody we have all over the world, there would probably be more people abroad voting than people in Ireland, and the politicians would not be happy with that, because in Ireland you get old fogies voting for the same state-old treaty parties, but people abroad might be less inclined to support the status.
It's not as big as you think, John. The Irish diaspora is 60 to 80 million people, right? But in saying that, most of those don't hold an Irish passport anymore. Most have changed citizenship. So the ones that still hold an Irish passport, like for example in America, it's 1.2 million as far as I know, that still hold an Irish passport.
Yeah, that would still outnumber the number of voters that turn up at the elections.
Probably, yeah, maybe. So it could have a huge effect if postal votes or internet votes were allowed. So you say they should be, provided it's only a temporary move. Is that what you're telling me?
No, I think they should be allowed, because there are people that are abroad and they're Irish. They generally take an interest in what's happening here. And given the level of incompetence and shambles that governments have been in recent decades, you might get a lot of votes for people who wouldn't want to lose their votes, or rather, a lot of people who would not want to lose their votes might lose their votes. And there's another thing here. Can I just mention this? I was on this morning just checking my own register. www.checktheregister.ie.
Yep.
Just to confirm, I have been registered because I know in the previous general election, but I wasn't sure about the local elections and that. So I tried to get onto this website. Do you think I could get onto a website here? It's a total shambles.
It's normally all right. It might be just very busy at the moment because, of course, the closing date for voting is coming up. So it might be just very busy at the moment. But I would urge everybody to go to checktheregister.ie and make sure you're registered.
Yeah, but now here's another thing everyone doesn't know, and someone mentioned it this morning. If you can't get on to your check the register because of the shambles of the website, and here they're talking about bringing all the other websites together in one large website.
One large database, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, the point is checking if you can't check the website, a small website, what hope have you of checking a big website?
Well, if anybody here's a little tip for you. If you're having difficulty checking the website, or you're not internet savvy, or you don't have access to your internet, which I don't know anybody who doesn't have access to the internet anymore, you can go to your local post office and you can ask them if you're registered, because your local post office will have a database. So you can go to your local post office to check if you're registered.
Well, this is an important point, and I'm not sure the answer to it, Niall. If I am living in Ireland and for years and years, and for some reason I've been dropped or I'm not on the register, can I go down to the local voting office with my passport and my address and say, I'm so-and-so, and I wasn't even able to...
No, you can go to your polling station. If you don't get a polling card in the post, you can still go to the polling station and vote, provided you bring your identification with you, but you must be on the register of electors. So in other words, you can't apply to vote on the day of the election, or the day of the referendum, or whatever it happens to be. But you must be on the register. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter whether you get a polling card or not. That's irrelevant.
I get you. Well, most people then, I presume, would be on the electoral.
Oh, you will. I mean, you would generally, unless you've changed address or you've done something or left the country and come back again or whatever it is, you should always be on the register of electors. But you just check anyway. There's no harm in checking. Anyway, the point is, John, you believe people should. There you go, Neil. As John said, they should be allowed to vote. They have an interest in the country.
Well, I don't think so. But I just want to add something there, that you can check out the hard copy of the updated register in your local library.
Yeah.
You should have a copy. Now, I checked the area where I am here in the centre of Galway City, and this is the updated one. It was 42% accurate.
Right.
There was 3 people on it, and the City Council tenants that were dead for the last 2 or 3 years.
Right.
The new tenants were not registered, and that goes.
But hold on, Nuala, with the greatest respect, you can't blame the government and you can't blame the Electoral Commission on all of that. People have an obligation to update it themselves. It's our obligation. As citizens, we have an obligation that if your granny dies or your ma dies, that you have an obligation then to inform the authorities or the registered electors, because they don't know everything. You know what I mean?
I get your point. And, when I rang up the franchise department of Galway City Council, they said to me, the next of kin should have informed us. I said the next of kin gave back the keys to the apartments in housing, in City Hall. So do you not know what's happening?
But they're not all. Yeah, but they're not all connected up together, because of GDPR and all that kind of carry on. Anyway, let me just go to Angela. Angela, because look, the system is not perfect. There is no electoral system in the world that's perfect, but it's as good as it's going to get.
In France, in France, it's under the Department of Defence and Security, so it's within 2% accurate.
It should be more accurate. I'm not going to disagree with you, but we do have a responsibility as citizens as well. But stay there for a second. Let me go to Angela. Angela, hi, how are you?
Hi, well, 2% accurate is still not 100%. So there is no country in the world that is accurate.
No. It's never going to be perfect, because people will die that they don't know of, or people who are born that just were never registered, or you might have somebody who's moved into a different province or whatever it is. So there's always going to be problems. Anyway, hopefully it's reasonably accurate so we get a fair picture on the day of the elections. Anyway, Angela, apart from voting for me, by the way, in the EU elections, well, you can't, by the way, you're over in Clare.
I can't. Could I not move up there for a week?
No, could you get your parents to live in Dublin, don't they?
My parents, they live in Clare.
Do they?
They're from Clare.
Do your whole family? You're not originally from Clare, are you?
Yeah.
I thought you were a dub. I thought you had excommunicated yourself to Clare.
No, I'm a blow-in. I'm a blow-in up in Dublin when I was there. I was up there for 10 years. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it
Angela,
just depends on who I'm talking to, the accent.
Well, look, tell all your friends to vote for me. That's the point, isn't it?
Oh, don't worry. I have them all warned.
Okay.
I'm not telling them. I'm warning them.
Right, that's a threat. That's always good. But, Angela, do you believe that people abroad should be able to vote?
No.
Why? Why not?
No. I just don't like, Niall. If we go down that road, then it's a thing of like you could have people from like living out of the country 40 years, What business is theirs? What goes on here?
Well, I mean, I'm in agreeing with you, in agreement with you and John, because I've always said that I don't believe people should be allowed to vote abroad. But in saying that, equally, we now are in a situation where we're seeing television advertising and governments encouraging asylum seekers to vote. I equally disagree with that as well, by the way.
Oh, I totally disagree with that.
Until a time they're given citizenship.
You are a citizen living in Ireland. End of. There you go. Isn't that easy? That's all it is.
Should Ukrainians be voting?
No.
Well,
they're not citizens.
The government are encouraging them to vote.
No, so they're not citizens.
No, and they're only meant to be here temporarily. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not even that. If they're here 50 years and they're not a citizen, I don't give a continental shite.
Mind you, if you are Ukrainian and you are listening, please vote for me in the European elections. Every vote counts. Seems you're allowed to vote, you might as well vote for me.
It needs to go to Niall, right? And it does.
But in saying that, what about the point that John makes? That, okay, this lad is over in America 3 years. He'd no choice but to move to America because the cost of living over here, etc., etc., etc. He went to work with his company. But he's still got a keen interest in what's going on here, and he may move back.
Well, if he moves back, that's fine. You can register when you come home. But no, once you're not living in this country, why should you? Why is it? It's like when people start giving out about Trump and Biden and everything over there in the States and how this is run. What? It's nothing to do with us technically.
Yeah, but if you're American and you're living in Ireland, you can vote in the American elections by post.
Yeah, but come here. That's their business. Do you know if they jumped off a cliff, will we jump off a cliff? No. And this is what we always say. Aren't we always saying, we're not American, we're not English, we're not French, we're not. So people say that when it suits them. That's always the thing they come back to. Oh, but the English are doing this. But it's like, well, we're not English. Why should we do it? But when it suits them, oh yeah, but sure, the English are doing it. Oh yeah, well, then we should. But with this, if you are not living in this country, right, what were you saying is that 2 million people could be eligible to...
Possibly, yeah. It's hard to get an actual figure,
right?
Yeah.
So what happens if all those 2 million people vote for something that the people in the country don't want them to vote for?
Yeah, John, there you go. Well, hang on. John, there you go. Angela kind of making perfect sense to me. Why would they be voting for something that's not even affecting them?
Hello?
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah, John, that's you.
Yeah, my wife has just made a very good point here. She's been listening to you. If you are living abroad and you have an Irish passport, you're a citizen of Ireland, and you should be entitled to vote. That's what she says. And why should an asylum seeker?
That's not what I said.
Why should no?
That's not
my
what
wife
I said.
said it. No,
I said a citizen living in this country, John.
Why should
a citizen living in this country
be allowed to vote in Ireland if he's here for 6 months and who knows what he is or where he's
from? I know, I agree. I think most people do agree with that. Asylum seekers and possibly Ukrainians who are temporary shouldn't be voting. We'll park that for the moment. We'll come back to that one again. But getting back to Irish citizens, Angela said you must be an Irish citizen resident in Ireland to vote as far as she's concerned.
Shouldn't be. If he has a passport... Why? He should be allowed to vote. He's Irish.
But John, can I ask you a question, right? John, can I ask you? Okay, well, you don't have to answer this. So let's say if most of this country, right, wants an independent in, okay? And that's what we're doing. We're all voting independent. And next to 2 million who aren't even living here, who have moved out and reside in a different country, turn around and go, well, actually, do you know what? Before we left, I thought Sinn Féin were doing a great job. So we're all going to vote Sinn Féin in. Would you be pissed off then?
If you, most people who are living abroad have a keen interest in Ireland, and if people in Ireland have changed their mind about Sinn Féin or any other party, you can be sure the people living abroad will also change their mind.
No, but you can't be sure, and you can't be guaranteed. So why should someone who is not living in this country, does not reside in this country, does not pay taxes in this country, does not spend their money in this country, why should they get a vote for what goes on in this country?
I suppose, John, the argument is that if a government, say, increase income tax, let's say Fine Gael increase income tax, or Sinn Féin increase income tax, well, Sinn Féin would because they're not in government, but Fianna Fáil increase income tax. Well, then that change doesn't affect the person living in America because they still get the same amount of wages every week in their pocket. So they're not really feeling the brunt of those decisions. the point Angela's making is why would you allow people outside of the country to vote for that party again that a lot of people might be unhappy with over here, who are actually feeling the brunt of those decisions? John?
I don't know the answer to that. I just all I can say is that if you and look, here's an important point. If only 20% of the population living in Ireland turn out for local elections, and about 45%,
it'll be higher. It'll be higher this time.
It's going to be double that. At least.
Only because of the shambles and the immigration thing that's going on at the moment. But the average turnout throughout the decades is that.
That would be that would be a low turnout. It's usually somewhere in the mid-30s.
For the local elections?
Yeah.
Okay, well, even the mid-30s, for God's sake, if you don't get local councillors out. Remember, they have the power to vote for the people who go into the Shannon. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, of course.
So if you want to get the gang in Leinster House out and their people in the Shannon House, you have to start with the local councillors and get them out.
Okay, but leaving aside the local elections, and I understand the point people make about local elections. It's a local issue, so it shouldn't affect somebody that's living abroad. But when it comes to general elections, I mean, that's going to happen in November, most likely, the general election. I mean, Angela is making the point that if you're living in Spain for the last 5 years, or America for the last 3 or 4 years, why should you get to play any role whatsoever in what happens in the next 5 years in this country?
Because Irish people do not lose touch with their heritage or anything to do with it, and they will be watching and monitoring every day on the internet what's going on in Ireland, and they will support.
Okay, well, hang on both of you a second. Let me just bring in Sandy. Sandy, hi, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm grand.
Hi, Sandy.
Right. Hi, Angela. How's it going? I'm grand. No, my decision would be if you're just living, say, in America up to 5 years, I think you should be able to vote. And my reasoning is because, we know the state of the country, and people are leaving because I'm saying the government, have this country fucked. Right? They have this country fucked.
Fair point.
But that's one point. But if I moved over to America in the morning and I left my son here, just up to 5 years, I should still be able to vote because I should be worried about extended family back at home, and if the American Embassy should set up a kind of a system. Sorry, just hold on a minute. You
mean the Irish Embassy in whatever country it happens to be? Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say, the Irish Embassy over there, just say in America, should allow the Irish citizens over there to vote through the Irish Embassy. So they won't lose out on their vote.
Okay, so they'll have to go to a little bit of trouble, but if they really cared enough, they'd do it. Yeah, that's the point.
I know, but the Irish Embassy should set it up with the government to set it up that kind of way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is my point of view. That was just...
Okay, well, maybe, Angela, there's a little bit of a compromise. So you set up, a polling station in the Irish Embassy in whatever country it happens to be, and there are Irish embassies all over the world. That means if they really cared about the country, they'll vote. So it doesn't make it too easy on a postal vote. So you're just basically doing it through the embassy, which means you have to go to a little bit of trouble to vote. So only those who really care would go.
There's two options, Niall. All it is two options. That you set it up right, with your passport and then the fingerprinting.
Yeah.
Oh, make life very easy. And that would be it. Because the governments are turning around and they're saying, oh no, we can't do this. There's so much paperwork, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, no, that wouldn't be a big deal to set up. No, it wouldn't be complicated to set it up. Angela, is that not a fair point?
No, it's not, because the way I look at it is, if you have left this country, you've left for a reason, right? When you leave the country, you take your heritage with you, but you leave all your rights here.
No, at home. No, sorry, love.
No, because you're not, like, there could be people abroad, right, who think that all of these, like, let's say electric cars, right? Let's just throw that out there. That they think that, living abroad, they're using their electric cars, they've all the stations, they've everything. It's great in the country that they're in. It's working brilliant. And it ain't going to work here. But they turn around and go, do you know what, yeah, I think that we should vote that by 2035, all cars should be gone in Ireland.
So let's vote for the Green Party.
Here.
Yeah, let's vote for the Green Party.
They're not even living here.
Right, here's another option for you. Just Paddy next door decided that he had to go to America with his daughter, who was very, very sick, because the healthcare system here, as you know, is absolutely crap. He decided to go up to America, and because with everything going on over there, he said, right, I'm going to live here for the next 5 years just to see how my daughter gets on, blah, blah, blah. And just say if there was a voting for the healthcare system in Ireland, he should be allowed to vote to try and help that voting system of the healthcare system, bring it up to date. For everybody else.
Because yes, he's gone to another country to help his child. There are plenty of people who do that.
But what I'm saying, Angela, if the healthcare system was up to date, it would stop other parents bringing their children abroad, which is costing them more money to bring them abroad.
What he does is he gets a flight home to vote. That's what you do.
If you do it through the Irish Embassy, if it sets it up that way, that would make life easier. That's what I'm trying to say.
What if he lives in the middle? What if he lives in the middle of Iowa, right, or Ohio, or one of those, and the Irish Embassy is in DC? He still has to travel there. So why not travel home to vote?
Okay, well, hang on. Let me just bring Renee in on this as well. Renee, hi. How are you?
Hello, Niall. How are you?
Good. Renee, should you be allowed to vote if you live abroad?
No, absolutely not.
Right, okay.
Because
why not? I mean, Sandy made some good arguments, as did John there, yeah.
The reason is because you don't have to live with the consequences. You made a decision to move abroad. You want to be there. You want to live there. And that's your decision.
Yeah, but John's argument is Irish people abroad take a keen interest in their own country and they might want to come back at some point.
Oh, yeah, but when they come back, then they can vote again. When the next general election is happening or the next local election is happening, then they're more than happy. Go and vote. Happy days. Fill your boots. But right now, this very present moment, you're abroad, you cannot vote. And it's as simple as that. And the next thing is with non-citizens, and I'm not on about permanent residents, I'm on about non-citizens, okay, should not be able to vote either, unless you have citizenship and show an interest in the country.
So as far as you're concerned, you must be a citizen and resident in the country.
Absolutely, because it's the same carry on in the US. You've got to be a citizen if you want to be part of the...
Man, no, if you're living in Ireland, if you're an American citizen living in Ireland, you can vote in America.
No, I'm on about if you live in the US, you've got to be a citizen to vote for the US elections.
Well, certainly in the presidential election, I think you do have to be, yeah. I don't know about local elections for the local governors.
Some states have local, you can't vote in local elections.
But I mean, there is an argument that, maybe Sandy makes a point that if you're gone for a certain number of years, let's say if you've gone past, say, 3 years, well, then you shouldn't vote. But if it's under 3 years, maybe because you might only be temporarily gone with work or something like that.
If you show that much interest in staying in the country, apply for your citizenship. You get it? You're more than happy to vote.
No, if that's the way you are, then just come home and vote. Isn't that like? That's what you do. If you're living over there and you can still vote here, come home and vote. But you're certainly not going to be sitting on your backside and be able to vote online. Sure, if that's the way, then why can't all of us?
It's not all. By the way, can I just point out? I agree with all of you. By the way, but I'm just giving the counter arguments. It's not always. It's not always possible, for people to take time out of work to come home, for polling day.
Well, then come here. As they said, you've got holidays. If you're really passionate about it and you really want to do it, then come home.
I agree. I agree on that one.
And the other thing, to be honest, the other thing is why should somebody be able to sit on their backside inside in front of a computer and vote at home when I can't do it here?
Well, it would be a postal vote. I don't think anywhere has done internet voting yet. Internet voting would be that would be disastrous.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So all you have to do is tick off the thing and send it off. You know, like what about people here who have arranged holidays and didn't know the voting thing, so their vote is gone? Why can't they do that here?
Okay,
No.
well, hang on, Renee, and
Another thing.
yeah,
Another thing is, why are you living? If you're living abroad, why do you show so much interest in local politics?
well, the argument is a lot of people moved abroad who didn't really want to move abroad. They moved abroad because they just couldn't afford to live here anymore, and we know how expensive Ireland has become, certainly in the last 10 years, and they'd love to come back again if things were better.
Okay.
You know, I suppose. And there are some people in that situation. But stay there. Morris, I'll come to Joe in a second. Morris, hi.
Good Niall, how are you doing? 30 in Dublin today. Weather horrific.
I know, it's dreadful, isn't it? Yeah, I know. It's awful.
Horrible.
It's gone from
Anyway.
it's gone from looking like summer to winter again. But Morris,
Yeah.
I mean, you heard Renee and Angela there basically. No,
Yeah.
you went off. That's your problem. Deal with it.
Well, I wouldn't look at it like that now because, like I told people before, my grandchildren are growing up in England because of this government and what they've done to the younger generation. Imagine kids getting educated in this country and then realising they have to go to the Middle East to a tax-free state and work for 2 years to get enough money to come back and buy a house. What a way to treat your young people. There you go. You're educated now. Go on, feck off out into the world. We have nothing here for you. And then, of course, when we get a few bob, throwing money left with hand over fist, and we abandoned generations of children growing up. Everybody took the boat. My mother brought me to the boat as a child to wave off my brothers and sisters, older, generations ago, who worked in JAG in England and everything else. And history is repeating itself. My older brothers and sisters are dead and buried in England now. My nephews and nieces are there. And now my child is over in England with my grandchildren. Because this country has no respect for young people. You're educated, feck off and be a problem somewhere else. So I think anybody that is really forced out of this country because there's no jobs for them or nobody cares about them. And I remember one politician, Fine Gael, sure, they're going away at their own, they want a lifestyle change. Let them off. What a sick fucker to say that about young people in Ireland. My daughter would love to come back here and work. You know what's up against her now? You have to live in the country for a year before you can get a mortgage. Mm-hmm. So I think my daughter should be able to allow vote. She was raised here for 26 years, and she's gone out with the last 7 years. I have 3 children, grandchildren in England. And Lucas, don't tell me for 1 minute, Niall Boylan or anybody else on this show, there's not men and women. There's a lot of men and women out of this country working and sending money back to their families. Because like I told you, history repeats itself. So if my daughter was able to get a vote, right, what do you call it, a postal vote, why wouldn't she have to go with the people that got her out of the country in the first place, that ruined the country? Why shouldn't she have a say and not let them do it again? We already voted once for change in this country, and we were given the 2 fingers by a 3-party coalition that got together and said, what? You people want change? Not on their watch, pal. You take what you're given and keep your mouth shut or get out. Ireland is changing. We want to take our country back.
Okay, but sorry, well, hang on, Morris. Renee, Angela, Morris makes a great argument there. You know what I mean?
Can I ask a question on that? How do you feel about Morris then, about non-citizens voting here?
How do I feel about what?
Non-citizens voting in Ireland. People who are Ukrainian or asylum seekers.
Yeah. Anybody that hasn't got an Irish passport or an Irish birth cert should have no say in the Republic of Ireland. End of story. There's Americans living here years, and they get a postal vote for America, right? They vote on the elections with the councillors, and they vote for the presidential. Why shouldn't Irish people who have forced to leave the country, as far as I'm concerned, have a say in the future of the country, and the people of Ireland take their country back?
I mean, I'm looking at a story here. A High Court judge has lambasted as disgraceful the need to send a 17-year-old girl to a specialist secure unit in Britain because there's no places available for her in Ireland. I mean, you know, there is a point, Angela and Morris or Renee, that, you know, a lot of people have left this country not out of free will, but because they had basically no choice to have a decent life.
I know, but in all fairness, medical reasons like that would be in the minority, right? Let's call it spade a spade. It'd be the minority that you've left the country for a medical reason to go to the States or to England. What we are talking about here is people who have moved and who live abroad be it Spain, England, America, why should they have a say on what goes on in this country? That's basically
because they were forced out. Because they were forced out because the government didn't give a shit about them.
Not
of course they were forced out.
Not everyone, Morris. Not everyone.
Angela, the last 20 years, the last 20 years in this country, we have lost generations of Irish kids that were told, there's nothing here for you, there's no money in the country is broke. The MFI came in, we owed billions, and we still owe billions. And they gave the generations the fingers. Get out and get work somewhere else. We've nothing here for you. And then as soon as
Morris, I'll tell you this. There are plenty of people who left this country and are living damn good lives where they're gone and are very happy.
Because they work hard for us. Yeah, because they work hard for them, Angela. And they know what it is. They're not coming into any country and sitting on their arse. You won't get out and hand it to you in this country.
Morris, the thing is, they are having great lives. They are living in.
Yeah, I understand. And they're entitled to it.
Yeah, they are entitled to it. Yeah. But they don't want to come back. They don't want to come back.
Some of them, the ones that do want to come back, listen, why should a young teacher who qualifies for being a teacher, after getting educated up to the eyeballs in this country, realise that the only way I'm going to get a property is if I go away and work in a Middle Eastern country, tax-free for 2 years to get 80 grand to come back to get a mortgage, to kill yourself for the rest of your life. I have a 28-year-old nephew who just got a house. £460,000 for a 3-bedroom semi-detached in Dublin 15. What's killing the kids? My daughter can pick up a house in London.
Morris, nobody. Yeah, but hang on, Morris. Nobody is. Hang on with the grace. Nobody is denying. You're 100% right, Morris. We shouldn't be forcing. Hang on, Angela. Hang on.
No.
We shouldn't be forcing people abroad. Absolutely, it shouldn't be. I mean, going abroad should always just be a choice, a lifestyle choice, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But that's not really the argument, Morris. If you do go away, let's say you're forced away to America or Spain or Portugal or wherever the hell you want to go, right? And you're or Dubai, if that's the case, right? And you decide, geez, it's not so bad over here. I could live over here. I like it here. And you're there, say 5 or 6 years, and you haven't thought about really coming back. Should you really be allowed to make a decision on a referendum or a general election that's affecting the people back home and not you?
I understand, Niall. All I'm saying to you is, if you have an Irish birth cert, an Irish passport, and you were born in this country, you have a right by birth to decide what the future of this country should be. And I'll give you the example for not letting non-nationals vote. We had a young woman that was murdered in this country 2 years ago by a guy that came in and sat on his arse for 10 years, never contributed to the country once, got a free house and got all the benefits he wanted. And all he did to this country was destroy a family and kill the young woman. He was here for 10 years, living on my hard work and everybody else's hard work, a freeloader. And that's why Ireland is changing. Listen, let me finish, Angela. Let me finish. Let me finish.
Let him finish.
Yeah,
let him
just
finish.
Let me finish. Okay. We're forcing our own young people out. We're bringing in the foreigners. And what are they doing? They're sitting on their arse getting 700 quid a week for a wife, a partner, and kids, free house and free everything. And the way he pays us back is he kills one of our citizens. He shouldn't see the light of day again. He killed her. He wiped out a future of families all over the place. So what I'm saying to you is, young people like my daughter and Niall's son that left the country and come back for a while, they should be given a right to decide the future because they were driven out by a corrupt government, Angela.
Okay. Let's just let Angela respond to that because I want to go to Joe and Billy. Go on. Sorry, go ahead.
What you were saying is that man who killed Ashley Murray, yes, everybody agrees with that. But hold on a second. You said that he was here not contributing to anything. But you're saying that an Irish citizen that is not contributing to anything should have the right to vote.
Oh, no, you're missing the point. I said any citizen that has a passport and is born in Ireland. Angela, no, I understand what you're saying. They left because the government couldn't look after them.
Morris, listen to me a second. They're living in another country and not contributing to Ireland. Why do they have
No,
a
they
right
are
to vote
contributing.
if they are
They
not
are
contributing?
contributing. They're sending back
How?
money to Ireland. They're
but
sending
not-
back money to Ireland to their families.
Some might be sending back money, Morris. They're not all. Most
of them are.
Yeah, most of them are earning money in another country, paying tax in another country, and buying goods with VAT or whatever it is in another country. So they're not financially contributing, generally speaking, to Ireland. There's the days of Paddy going off to London and leaving the wife and kids at home and sending home the money every week. Those days are kind of gone. That's unnecessary now.
Oh, they're not, Noel. They're still there. I know plenty of fellas that are in the Middle East working on engineering jobs, and their wife and kids are here.
Okay, well, stay there because I got to go to Joe. Thank you, Morris. Joe, hi. How are you?
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Niall. How are you? I hope the campaign is going well, Niall.
Oh, it is. It's flying. I'm getting to meet so many people, by the way. I was in, over the weekend, by the way, I was in Tala, Clondalkin, Killester, Artane, Donamead, Templeogue. Oh, we were everywhere. I have the legs worn off myself.
I nearly think now they'd say that they'd actually recognise you now better than the other weasels.
Oh, they do recognise me better than the other
state,
weasels.
Like.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I hope you do get elected, Niall. I think you will. I think you have a great chance.
So. I want everyone to go out and vote for me. Don't just assume that I will. I want everyone to go out and vote for me.
Well, unfortunately, I can't vote for you here in Cork, but I'll be voting for your candidate.
Eddie Punch.
Eddie Punch, right.
Yeah,
Good. That's great. Yeah.
Okay, so Joe, getting back to voting, should you be allowed to vote if you leave the country?
Well, look, the way I look at it, Niall, is if you're a genuine Irish citizen who has emigrated to America or Canada over the last, say, 20, 30 years, and you do come back to Ireland every so often, which a lot of people do, I wouldn't have any problem with that, providing, of course, that they are genuine. Now, I have said it before. There should be no illegal migrants or anyone like that who are coming into this country voting. That I don't agree with that because
I agree with you. I think that's barmy, by the way. But
well, it's corruption because you could imagine if we were living in North Africa or some country and we were voting in a referendum, we tried to apply. I can guarantee you wouldn't be around to tell the tale.
You wouldn't be allowed. You wouldn't be allowed to vote.
Be shot.
I couldn't believe that, by the way, this year, particularly because it's been brought to our attention this year. This idea that even asylum seekers can vote. I just find that bizarre.
Yeah, and the biggest laugh of all, I see a former RT reject who has been seen for nearly 3 decades is now running for Fianna Fáil in the Ireland South constituency. A woman by the name of Cynthia Neymoraku. You might have heard of her.
I vaguely remember the name, vaguely.
Yeah, she used to do a show called Cousy or something. I think it's beyond there in the 80s on RT. It was a political show. And she also was the fellow host of the Eurovision in 1994 with Jerry Ryan. Do you remember that?
Oh, I actually do. I do know who she is now, yes. The famous river dance. Yeah, I remember that,
That's right, yeah.
And she's running for election as well, is she? Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, Micheál Martin now seems to be doing a Bobby Ewing kind of thing. He's kind of reappearing from a dream.
I'm surprised, by the way, that Fianna Fáil haven't hired Bambi Tug to run for election. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Fianna Fáil would get anyone to run from. They're so corrupt. But in relation to Irish people voting in elections, if you're a true Irish patriot, Niall, if you're a person who has good roots to this country, I would have no problem with that. But I see what the other contributors have said there, and everybody makes great contributions here today. I also say that if you're coming over, if you're voting, right, you should be at least have allegiance to the Irish state, not to any other state. And if you're, say, coming in here illegally, without any documentation or anything like that, you should have no way you should be allowed to vote.
I don't think many people would disagree with you on that point, Joe. Joe, stay there for a second because I want to go to Billy as well. Billy, hi, how are you?
Niall, how are you keeping?
Billy, this is a complicated one. Well, there's two arguments going on here. Whether people who are living here temporarily, i.e. Ukrainians or asylum seekers, should be allowed to vote. I don't believe they should. A lot of people agree they shouldn't be allowed to vote. But the main question here today is, if you move abroad, like our emailer who sent us in the messages, living in Boston 3 years with his family because it was necessary for him to move, should he have a right to vote in an Irish election?
Niall, it's funny you say Boston. I'm going to throw your mind back to 1776 on the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah.
When the Americans threw the tea from the ships into the water. And what did they say? No taxation without representation. I'm going to turn that on its head and say no representation without taxation.
Okay.
Morris, who made the comment about people living overseas wanting to vote and being forced away, right? It's a case that if they want to vote and if they're sending money back, let them make a tax return in this country. Let them top up whatever tax they're paying overseas, and if that's PRSI that they want to make contribution-wise or whatever else. But I think anyone who is not paying into this system, anyone who is not paying
Well, in other words,
into the
that means that they must
state-
be, if they're out of this country for more than 6 months of the year, they're not paying tax in this country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's normally the
if you're-
situation, isn't it? Yeah.
If you're not, you can. There are some countries where we do have mutual recognition.
Well, that's
of
Ireland and
taxes paid.
England. Yeah, between
Like-
Ireland and England. Yeah.
No, South Korea is included, and there's some other countries as well, and you can do it on a voluntary basis. Also.
South Korea, that's odd. I've never heard of that. But
Talk to anyone who's done teaching English as a foreign language in South Korea. They'll tell you that you can do it there as well.
Okay.
But Niall, it does exist. I think if an Irish person living abroad wants to vote, then we should have to make a tax return back to this country. We should
That's a fair
have to
point.
pay into
Okay,
the
that's a fair
state.
point.
Because Niall, if you're not living here, you're not directly affected by the decisions that are made by politicians on a day-to-day basis. You are living in Australia or Boston or California. What's going on in local politics here doesn't really affect you.
But we are unique in that sense, Billy. When I say unique, we're one of only 3 countries, I think, in Europe that don't allow postal votes or don't allow citizens to vote abroad. I mean, most countries do, including the United States, of course.
Well, the other potential solution here is that you have a constituency for overseas voters. So it's not a case that every voter in Dublin South Central that's living in California will be able to vote in Dublin South Central. You take all the Irish overseas and you do what France does, which is the French overseas vote for people who are not resident, and you say, okay, we're going to have 74 TDs in the next Dáil. I think you up that to maybe 76 or 77, and you give a constituency of 3 or 4 seats for Irish people who are living
That seems
overseas.
fair. Well, that seems like a reasonable and a fair response to that. There was a suggestion, by the way, in the Oireachtas. They did put a bill through back in 2019, but it didn't gather any legs at the time to allow people to vote abroad. I think from what I'm getting and the reaction we're getting online here, and certainly the messages and tweets and WhatsApps, the vast majority, I would say 80% of people, don't agree with Irish people voting abroad.
But now, the thing about it is, how do you differentiate? Is it Irish passport holders?
Passport
or Irish
holders.
birth cert holders?
No, passport
so
holders.
Take Irish passport holders. I think there is, and correct me if I'm wrong in this figure, I think it's 5 times the number of people who live on the island hold Irish passports.
I'm trying to find the... Now, hold on. Here's the
entitled
thing. There's so many answers online to this question, right? And there doesn't seem to be a definitive answer. 60 to 80 million people are expats, okay? That's 60 to 80 million people would claim Irish heritage. But the number of people holding passports, it's difficult to get an answer, between 1.2 and 3 million. It's not as many as you think holding Irish passports.
But the entitlement. So an ex-girlfriend of mine was American. She was entitled to an Irish passport because her dad, who had gotten an Irish passport, had put her on the overseas birth list.
Yeah.
Right? So that's something that exists. So on
Well,
their dates,
my cousin is over there since the day she was born. I have 2 cousins, Mary and Sean. They live in America, right? Because my uncle moved to America, but he never changed his passport. He always held on to his Irish passport. They have dual.
If they were registered.
They've
they
dual
were registered
citizenship
on the overseas. If they were registered on the overseas birth list, they're entitled. But if they've never lived a day in Ireland, what do they really know about Irish issues?
Now, they don't. They used to follow Irish issues a lot when their parents were alive, but they probably don't so much now. They both hold Irish passports and American passports because they've dual citizenship, right? So, but I don't believe they should be allowed to vote here. Not a chance.
But as I said, the fairest solution there would be to say, okay, you're saying 1.2 million. You say we will create a constituency for overseas passport holders. If it's 1.2 million of them, we'll give them 4 seats or 5 seats because they don't need the same level of representation as someone here. I think the representation here is between 1 TD to every 30 to 40,000.
Okay, but that's a good compromise, by the way. That's the first time I've heard a good compromise today. But stay there for a second, Billy. John, hi, how are you?
Hey, Dylan, well, best of luck with the campaign.
Thanks very much indeed. I was actually in Donamead outside the shopping centre the other day, handed out me leaflets and everything else, talking to people in Donamead. So we had a good old chat with lots of people from Donamead the other day outside the shopping centre. So
Very good, very good.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be successful. I hope you get all your friends to vote for me too, John.
Will do.
John, should you be allowed to vote if you live abroad?
Yeah, I definitely think for the general elections. Well, I mean, the guy before me there, I think it was Billy, he mentioned tax. What about the people that pay like 50 or 60,000 tax a year and they're paying that the last 10 or 20 years? If they move away to work for a year or two, they contribute more than the average person will ever do in their lifetime. Are you going to strip their vote away from them just because maybe they had to work? You know, maybe they work for a big multinational and they go abroad to work for a year or two. And then I think it was Morris mentioned that people move away due to maybe governments that are in, and they may go, actually, I don't want that government again. So they're really passionate. I mean, we look at people here, we struggle to get people out to vote. So it's not as if every passport holder of an Irish national across the world is going to vote if we suddenly let them. It's only the people that really care and are passionate about it.
Yeah, that's a fair point too, Billy. They won't vote if they don't care.
It's Sean there on the other line, is it?
John.
Apologies, John. So, John, I'm going to throw a hypothetical situation at you here, right? Mm-hmm. So, tomorrow, we will allow every Irish passport holder to vote in our general elections, right? Now, as you know, it's about 50 to 60% of people who will vote in a general election locally at any given time. But we're going to open it to everybody. And some political party, online, with the use of social media, manages to engage with the other 1.2, 1.3, 3 million, however many people overseas with Irish passports that we can validate now, right? And say, for example, that the 5 million people in Ireland, we vote, say, the three-way split, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, whatever way that three-way split works, but as it usually does. But some third or fourth party comes in and manages to get the majority of those overseas votes through engagement on social media. We will be directly affected, even though our opinion of the people living on this island was for the three-way split or whatever way we traditionally vote, but the people who don't live here have adversely affected, and their opinion is given more weight than our opinion living here. Would that be fair?
Well, I mean, look, the first thing is life isn't fair. The second thing is...
Oh, no, hold on a second.
Let him answer.
So let me finish. If a party was good enough to manipulate the internet and to be able to target that many people abroad, they're definitely better than the people we have in government at the moment. If they have that capability, they probably have a good capability to run the country.
I'm sorry now, but you just said, first point, life isn't fair. You're going to turn around to the Irish taxpayer, to the 3.5 or 3.6 million people who work on this island, and say to them, I'm sorry, lads, your voice doesn't count because you voted for 3 or 4 different parties, but the other overseas people, they clobber together, they don't pay tax here, they don't live here, but their vote, their representation as overseas people is more valuable than yours. And I'm going to finish this point by saying you've just given the reason for the foundation of the United States. No taxation without representation. The US broke away from the UK because it did not have fair representation in the UK at the time.
Do me a favour, both of you. Stay there for a second because let me go to Lorenzo as well. Lorenzo, hi, how are you?
Hi, Niall, how are you?
I assume, Lorenzo, you can vote in Italian elections.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though you're living here 20 years or whatever it is you're living here, yeah.
Yeah. If you have a passport, you have the right to vote. And you have the duty to work because it's in the Constitution.
Okay.
And I presume it's the same thing in Ireland. You have the right and the duty to vote. I think it's written in the Constitution.
But if I move to Italy for 5 years, for 6 months, or actually if I go there for 2 weeks, I don't have a right to vote.
Well, that's crazy because if you are a citizen, it's your right and your duty to vote.
Oh, no, I can come home, by the way. I can fly home and vote on polling day. There's nothing stopping me doing that, provided I'm still registered. But I don't have a right to vote abroad.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think it's wrong. You should have the right to vote, even if you are abroad, because you're still an Irish citizen. So the Constitution still applies to you even if you're not living in Ireland.
The Constitution doesn't really apply to you. If you're living in another country, you're living under their laws. The Constitution of Ireland is reasonably irrelevant to you.
But you still have the Irish passport, so you're still member of...
You're still an Irish citizen.
The Irish citizen, so you should be allowed to vote for Ireland, even if you're not living in Ireland. Because I can understand the point of, yeah.
Can I ask a question just on, because my ignorance on the Italian voting system, when you vote, are you voting in the place that you came from, the town or the city that you came from? Is that where your vote goes to? Or are you voting for politicians who represent you as an overseas citizen?
No. So if you have to vote in your, let's say, for the local, and when I say local, I mean like your town hall kind of thing, you can't do it abroad. You have to basically travel back. So if I have to vote for the mayor in Pisa, I have to travel back in Pisa and vote from there. But there is funds that they...
For municipality elections, you have to be present to vote. So that will be
the local election, same as the local elections here.
Okay.
Yeah, but the national...
But the general election,
For the general election, I can vote from here. So I get at home, I get the letter...
And what about referendum? I don't know. Did you have referendums? I can't remember now. But,
I can do everything from here.
From here.
So even Italian referendums, I vote from here.
With voting in your the parliamentary elections, the National Assembly, are you? Is it like here where Dublin South Central? Are you voting in your equivalent of Dublin South Central, or are you voting in I'm Italian living overseas constituency?
No, there is a separate list for Italians that are abroad. So they are basically, you're voting for 8, I think there are 8 representatives.
Okay.
That you are only allowed in the Italian parliament for the Italians abroad.
Okay, that's exactly what you were saying, Billy. Yeah.
So for that was the point that you were saying in terms of...
But he can vote in referendums, Billy, and that's a game changer for people. So, you know what I mean?
Referendums, Niall, like, I know we talked about previously as a country letting people vote for referendums overseas. There have been people on the left and on the right who have argued for and against this over the last number of referendums, particularly around divorce, repeal of the 8th Amendment. I think it is the group of the day that thinks that it's going to be more beneficial for them.
Of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, when we had the marriage equality referendum, of course, they were all for people coming home to vote. But if it was a separate type of referendum, i.e. divorce, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, they probably wouldn't be quite as keen.
Exactly. So I think that has to be looked at. I think if you're going to bring this in, as I said, the system, without knowing, I gave you the system that Italy has. I think that is the fairest way of doing it. In terms of referendums, again, I would have to see how that would work. Lorenzo, just one other clarification on Italian policy. Yeah. Do you have to make any tax returns on an annual basis to the Italian government? So it's not like the US where you're living overseas, you have to make a tax return back to the IRS every year.
No, absolutely. I'm registered here. I'm not doing anything I'm not paying any taxes in Italy for the work I'm here, but I can still vote with no problem because again.
Okay, but is it fair? Okay, you've told us the system, and as you pointed out, you can vote obviously in general elections and referendums as well. But is it fair that you have a choice to pick a representative, even though it may be for those overseas, or to pick a decision and a right and a wrong decision in a referendum for people who are living in your home country that will not? It's a decision that just will not affect you whatsoever, really. Is that fair?
Well, it doesn't affect me now, but if in 6 months I want to go back in Italy, then they will affect me. So,
but in 6 months' time, but the argument is, that when you move back to Italy, well, then you should be allowed to vote because, of course, you're living there again. But you may never move back to Italy. You may stay here for the rest of your life.
Well, but there is no possibility that you can know the future. So
absolutely, but when you go back, you can vote. That's fine.
Yeah, but then if you don't go back because there's something that is not changing, and you can change the thing that then allow you to go back, why can't you vote then?
Okay, well, stay there. Let me just bring Madeleine in as well. Sorry, Madeleine, go ahead.
I'm just waiting for somebody to explain the rationale behind allowing people who don't live here legally to vote. So no more than I'd agree with if you're living in another country and you've left Ireland, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. But you shouldn't be allowed to vote if you're not an actual resident, that you have a passport, you have papers, you live here, you work here. Can somebody explain that rationale to me?
I can't explain the rationale to you because I agree with you. And I'm just trying to, obviously, there are some people who have come on the air today who believe you should be allowed to vote because, say, for example, you're living in America, you might have a keen interest in Irish politics and you're worried about your relations who still live here or your grandchildren that might move back to Ireland or whatever, and you believe you should have an input into the decisions made in this country. I don't get that.
I have two kids who live in America, and as far as I'm concerned, they are American, and I'm glad they didn't get to vote in the last referendum. One of them would have voted yes and the other would have voted no, so I'm glad they didn't get to vote. But I just...
So they would have cancelled each other out.
They would have cancelled each other out.
Exactly, but I can't get my head around people who are here illegally with no documentation and nobody knows who they are being allowed to vote, and actually some of them even running in the elections.
So, Madeleine, if I may, and I'm very much playing devil's advocate on this and using Lorenzo's example of the municipalities in Italy. So if you're living in a place in, I keep going back to Dublin South Central for some reason, I don't live there, but it's the first one that comes to mind. If you're living there in that townland and, you have a candidate who, for example, wants to build a playground for kids. It's something that directly affects you. If you have kids, you're living in the area, you should probably be able to vote for that person.
Yeah, but if you're only here temporary as a guest of the nation, so to speak, and I've heard that word used in the news over the last few days. So you're here as a guest, Ukrainian citizens, for example, who are living in Ireland as guests of the nation temporarily, right? Many of them will be moving back to Ukraine, hopefully, when the war ends. So, why should they be allowed to vote? The war can end tomorrow.
Those people who are temporarily here have been temporarily here since February 2 years ago.
I understand, but the war could end tomorrow or the next day. I don't know.
They've been here for a prolonged period of time now.
But they're not citizens of Ireland.
But Niall, I will cast a vote in the local and European elections in June. I could equally, the following day, as an Irish citizen, get up and leave the country for 5 years.
I do get that.
I'm living here now. I have the right to kind of decide who in.
But what about Madeleine makes a point. What about an asylum seeker who's arrived in this country, who's waiting to receive confirmation whether they have been given the right to remain or they are going to be deported?
What
about them?
Backtrack. Allowed to vote. They don't have identity. They don't have documentation. How can you be?
So Madeleine, we don't need to have identification for polling in this country. You only need to receive a polling card. That you register to be at an address. You don't have to provide identification otherwise.
Well, I absolutely disagree, and I've left a large group of people this morning asked me if I was on here this morning, would I ask that question, because people, their heads are literally wobbling.
So, Madeleine, can I just give you an anecdotal point that in the UK under Boris Johnson, the Tory party brought in a requirement that all people would have identification to vote. Boris Johnson in the locals in UK showed up to his polling centre without his identification and was turned away.
The same argument is going on in America at the moment. Of course, Donald Trump wants to bring in a situation where you have to bring identification. By the way, I think I see nothing wrong with having to have identification.
That's a whole civil liberties conversation. I'm on board with you there. I think we should all have a form.
But it avoids any deception. It avoids manipulating voting, or as Donald Trump called it, voter interference. It avoids all of those things if people have to have identification when they're voting.
Yeah,
it's the very thing society is built on: right, wrong, boundaries. There are no boundaries. There's no enforceable laws. Like, this is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, to say that you can go in and vote for somebody in a country that you are not a resident of, that you do not have a passport, you do not have identification or documentation. It's beyond ridiculous. You couldn't make it up.
So, look, I do know in the rest of Europe, under civil law as opposed to common law, which we have here in the UK, under civil law, everyone is required to carry an identification card, a state-issued identification card. Mm-hmm. I've heard arguments for and against it in Ireland over many, many years. personally speaking, I always carry my driver's license with me, which is a form of identification. But, I think having a form of identification in country is a sensible thing to do. But I do know that the Irish Council for Civil Liberties will absolutely lose their mind if you suggest that we bring that in here, because they will say that it is...
they're useless, the Irish Council of Civil Liberties. I have to be honest, some of the nonsense I've seen them agreeing with lately.
I think if you're going to go to do a vote in an election, you should have to have proof of address, proof of your name.
Very quickly, Madeleine, because I've Bernie and Breda just to get to the next 5 minutes. Do you believe that people abroad, like an Irish person living in Boston, for example, for the last 3 years, should they be allowed to vote in a postal vote abroad?
No, I just said that. I have 2 kids living in America. No, because when they move into the country, their views change. They don't live in the country we live in. They don't live with what the politics live with.
Yeah. So, Madeleine, if I can, and Niall, I know you're getting to other people. Madeleine, what if there was a specific constituency for all Irish citizens living overseas that had 4 or 5 TDs that they could vote for and represent them as an overseas voice?
I just think you've moved country, you're living under a different set of rules, different set of politics, and I mean, look, people are trying to normalise what's going on here. You don't need somebody who's been living away for 10 or 12 years. I'm saying that because my kids live away, and we argue all the time about stuff. I wouldn't want them here because they're different, they've more liberal views. There's a large proportion of this country are all there.
Are you telling me, Madeleine, that your kids are woke?
My son is definitely, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But you still love him.
He's gone he's gone too Americanized for me altogether.
Can't be dealing with that. Listen, I'm running out of time rapidly. Madeleine and Billy, thank you very much indeed. Let me go to Bernie. Bernie, hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you, Niall?
Bernie, should they be allowed to vote if they live abroad?
If I've had to live with this shite for the last 5 years and they're living the high life in any other country, no, they shouldn't be allowed. I've had to suffer this daily torture of listening to rubbish every day on the news, all these different things going on every single day for the last couple of years, and my kids are away and they're going to come home and tell me that I'm completely whatever name they want to tell me, and they haven't lived here. No. I don't agree that anyone who is not living here shouldn't, and asylum seekers shouldn't be allowed to vote. Nobody should be allowed to vote unless they're have their own identification here, or paying taxes like we all have done, and we deserve a vote.
I think that was a good point that Billy made, that if you're paying tax, well then maybe yes, but if you're not paying tax in this country, you shouldn't be allowed to vote.
No, you shouldn't. And if you're a guest of the nation, which most of them are, well, no.
I also in agreement with everybody. If you're a guest of the nation, i.e. you're here temporarily, or you're here as an asylum seeker, I don't believe you should be allowed to vote. I just think that's bizarre.
How would you have any history of the country? Like, where would you know where things have gone? How do you know what so-and-so has done in the past or a previous election? Do you know, like, how would you know these if you're a guest of the nation? Like, I wouldn't have a clue if I was living in Russia, God forbid, that I had to move there. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't expect to be asked to be able to vote over there.
Let me hang on.
I wouldn't have a clue.
Okay, well, let me go to Breda as well. Breda, hi, how are you?
Hi, Niall. How are you?
Good. Yeah, we got a bit rogue here today, I think. But go on, Breda. Should you be allowed to vote?
Well, I think if you've gone away just for a few years and you're planning to come back and live in this country, yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, you're
planning to come back, but you might never come back.
Okay, but like I think if like the Americans can vote when they're abroad and whatever else for their elections, so I don't see why we can't do the same thing here. I mean, the next generation is a generation that's going to hopefully change the way things are at the moment. I'm
curious as to this opinion that people believe you should be able to vote when you're abroad. The decision you make is for 5 years, essentially, right? If it's a referendum, it's forever until there's another referendum, right? So general election is for 5 years. So that decision you've made to vote for a certain representative in this country, you're not even going to be here to feel the brunt of it and the decisions they make.
But you could be back in 2 years' time.
But you might not be back in... When you come back in 2 years' time, you can vote in the next election if you want to. But if you're not here, you're not here.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense.
No, I don't agree. I think if unless you've permanently emigrated and you've taken up dual citizenship, I think you should be allowed to have a say in what's happening in the country that you would eventually more than likely come back and live here in.
So you're telling me the 1.2 to 3 million people that hold Irish passports abroad currently at the moment should all be allowed to vote?
If they were born in Ireland. Like not if you're getting it from your granny's.
Oh, well, now, if you want to extend it to those born in Ireland, you can move that figure up to about 10 million, by the way.
Yeah. There's 75 million claiming people of Irish descent. In the world.
Well, that's Irish descent now, okay? But those born in Ireland is probably about 10 million.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people born in the country, raised here in the country, have gone off to live in Australia for a year. They have a year's permit and they're coming back at the end of the year. Why shouldn't they have a say in what's going to go on in the country? They have to get out of Australia. You can't stay in Australia.
Now, forget about the Australian. Hold on, forget about the example you're giving me. Let's say the example of the email I got earlier on, the family that have moved to Boston 3 years ago. So he's living in Boston, he's working with a company.
Yeah.
Now, he may come back in 2 or 3 years' time. They may live there for the rest of their lives with their kids. Okay? Should he be allowed to vote?
Yeah, why shouldn't he? Because the chances are he'll come back and work here.
But we don't know. Well, if he's going to come back and work here, well, then he can vote if he wants to.
If he's working for the likes of Intel or some of these, they send them off for 3-4 years. I have friends that have done it. They live there. They all come back here. They all end up back here working in the main place down the road for me. So why shouldn't they have a say in what's going on in their country, that they're going to come back and their children are going to
You're making an assumption they're going to come back. A lot of people don't come back, Breda.
A huge amount of people come
We're not
home
like a
now.
magnet here in this country.
No.
They're not pigeons.
So you're saying that they have been...
Sorry, Bernie. Go ahead.
So she's saying that they've gone on temporary contracts, say from the likes of Boston Scientific here in Galway. They've taken a sabbatical to their country, their Boston branch for 3 years. They're on a contract. I understand your point, but they'd have to come home and have an Irish resident here. They shouldn't sell up everything to move, because if you sell up everything here to move to Boston for 3 years, well, then you're kind of saying, well, if I like it, I'm going to stay for the rest of my time. So I don't think that in that case...
Most people that do that kind of a sabbatical don't sell their homes. They rent them out for the 3 years.
But if you cared enough, Breda, about Ireland and you cared enough about the elections, you can always fly home and vote if you want to.
Yeah, come home for your holiday and have your holiday around the election time.
If you can afford to. Now, you know how much flights are, and I work for an airline, and I know how expensive flights are. Like, it's not always possible. But the Americans have the right to vote, to go to their embassy in the country they're living in and vote. So why shouldn't the Irish be able to do the same?
Did I see a story yesterday, speaking of airlines, that a couple were performing a sexual act on an airline?
I saw that on BA. Well, I can tell you, good luck on my flight, because they wouldn't do it.
Have you never caught anybody doing the...
No. It was years ago. There was a young fella from a famous hurling team that had won an All Ireland on their way to New York, and he pulled this young one on the plane, and there was hanky panky going on in the toilet very noisily, and the number one went down and knocked on the door and said, "Get out, you dirty things, get out now!" And out your man came swinging the bra and got a big roar from all the young fellas. That's the only thing I've never... No. Would you go in there?
Okay, well, hang on. Let me just go to Connor. Not about having sex on planes, about voting. Connor, quick. We're running out of time rapidly here. Go ahead, Connor.
Hey, how are you doing, Niall? I say the fact you mentioned, if you're not here, should be the slogan.
Yeah, if you're not in, you can't win. Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Well, I think Billy made a good point. If you're not paying tax in Ireland... You shouldn't be voting. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I believe there should be. I believe the criteria should be a citizen of the country and paying tax in the country. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I mean, if you care that much, fly back. Because I remember some referendum, the gay marriage referendum, they made a big deal about people flying back. They cared enough to fly back.
Yeah, they did. A lot of young people flew back for that referendum. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you cared that much, fly back.
All right, okay.
And I wouldn't be using America as an example of a democracy or follow them at the moment. You know what?
Now, don't upset Niall. He's a big Donald Trump fan. Now, come on, don't be upsetting poor Niall about that.
Exactly.
Lord.
And American democracy at the moment have him on trial so he can campaign or fundraise.
Oh, right, yeah.
You know?
It's not going to stop him becoming the president, mind you, I don't think.
Absolutely. Hopefully not.
Yeah, he could be only the second American president in history, or the second person in history to run for presidency while in jail. Mind you, he has to have, because he's an ex-president, well, which is still classed as a president in America, because you're always a president in America, you'll be assigned members of the Secret Service to look after you. as you know. So he has an entourage with him all the time. He has to, by law, under American law. So what happens if they put him in jail? Do they all have to sit in the cell with him?
Probably will. Yeah. Don't you know now, Niall? He'll be put in a big, nice, cushy place.
Like a penthouse cell.
Yeah, like a penthouse.
Okay, I've got one more. They just keep piling the callers on here. Get another Connor. Hi, Connor.
How you doing, Niall? How are things?
Good. Another Connor. Connor, absolutely not, according to Connor. Breed is the only one here. So Bernie says no. Breed is the only one who says you should be allowed to vote.
Yeah, I don't agree with Breeze, unfortunately. I feel like... Sorry about that. I think you should be able to vote, but when you come back, I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's not if you miss a vote, if you're abroad, you come back, it's going to be the same. You know, there'll be another general election in the future, and I feel like not many people only leave for a year or two when they leave the country, and it's not the be all and end all. So it's one of them things, you know. And on a side note, just another thing about like immigrants voting and stuff like that. My wife is Brazilian, so she's here a year, so she's on her stamp 4, and technically she's paying tax and stuff, but she doesn't have a passport. So she'll have her passport after 3 years, which I think is like, you know, ideally it would be great if you could vote now because she's paying tax and we're living here. But it's okay to wait for 3 years to get your passport. I think you should have a passport and residency. Just that's my opinion, you know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe local elections, as long as you're paying tax. Maybe local elections, if you're a resident and paying tax, local elections. But I think when it comes to general elections or referendums, I think you should have to be a citizen and have a passport. Absolutely. I think so. I don't. By the way, I'm not casting any judgment on your missus. By the way, I'm just saying in that regards, because the idea that an asylum seeker who's only here 5 or 6 weeks or something like that, waiting for an asylum decision, should be allowed to vote in a local election. I think that's barmy.
No, don't agree.
Well, they are. That's barmy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like if I went somewhere for a week or two, I don't think I'd be interested in voting for. You know, I'd have a bit of cop on. Like I don't really see the point.
I mean, I'm just thinking about this whole idea that, you know, Ukrainians or asylum seekers can vote in the local elections. So, well, then you might as well let people who are here on holidays vote while they're at it, if it's going to be that easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Connor, thank you very much indeed. And Breeda, thank you very much indeed. We shall get back to that conversation with Breeda another time about having sex on planes. It's a very interesting one. In the meantime, thank you very much to everybody involved in the show today. By the way, can I mention as well, as you all know, I'm running for election. I'm running in the EU elections. I'm representing Dublin, the Dublin constituency on 7th of June, and I would ask you to vote for me. Every single last one. You all know what I stand for at this stage. I won't stand for any nonsense, that's for sure. But unlike the other parties, the main political parties, and by the way, a vote for me is a vote against them, because of course we want all of them out. We don't want party candidates getting into the EU. We want good representation of the EU this time, not woke Egypts over there. But unfortunately, those parties have deep pockets. Election campaigns cost a lot of money. So I am asking you to try and help us out, please, if you can. If you go to the website at niallboylanforeurope.ie, you can donate a tenner, 20 quid, whatever it is. They all have deep pockets. To give you an idea, some of those candidates in the last EU elections spent between 100 and 150,000 euro on their campaign. I wouldn't be spending anywhere close to that because we wouldn't have it. Now, of course, if you get up to a quarter of the quota, you get your money back again. Of course, the state pay you back the money again, but you have to get a quarter of the quota to do that. So there's always the risk that you won't get your money back, and there's a good reason for that. They don't want people wasting money. But I think it's really unfair, because you have a democratic right in this country to run for election. If you're a citizen of this country, you have a right to run for election. And I think it's really unfair that, the larger parties who have very deep pockets and great, big funders and companies that fund them, they can do it very easily and get their name and their brand out there very quickly and get a lot more votes than somebody who's smaller and doesn't have that kind of money. So I think that system is unfair. We need to tackle that in the future. I don't think it's democratic. I think there should be a limit by law on how much people who run for election can actually spend. There doesn't seem to be any kind of limits on it. The world is your oyster if you have the money. There should be a limit to make it fair for everybody to run for election, so we can have fair representation across the board for everybody who wants to run for election. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is it's difficult for us. Everything costs a huge amount of money. Just even posters on polls cost a ridiculous amount of money. But it has to be done. Otherwise, we don't get it out there. I think there's a lot of people out there that would vote for me that maybe don't even know I'm running for election. So we have to get it out to everybody. And getting that message out is really hard. That's why we're out walking the streets every single day. and trying to do the podcast in the middle of it all as well. So it's really important that you try and help us if you possibly can. I hate asking people for money. I really do. And I know we do it for the podcast all the time. But everything costs money, as you well know. So please, if you can donate to the campaign, please do it. NiallBoylanForEurope.ie is the website. Please help me out, and I promise you, I want to be there to make a change, to make all the changes that you've talked about to me for the last 30 years. I've been listening to people for 30 years. Unlike the politicians who don't listen to you at all, I'm listening. I know where the problems are. I want to help to fix all those problems, and I want to put Ireland first in Europe. I've seen the Fianna Fáil posters, by the way, that said Europe matters. I'll tell you now what matters. Ireland matters in Europe. Let's make Europe work for us, not the other way around. So please help me to get elected. And to do that, you can help by donating on the website, by voting for me, obviously, first on June the 7th, but obviously donating on the website if you can, NiallBoylanForEurope.ie. And as well, by the way, don't forget, of course, the podcast costs money to do. If you can subscribe to our podcast, please go onto our website, niallboylan.com, niallboylan.com. I'll push that more again when the elections are finished. Obviously, I don't want to be asking you for too much at the one time. But please do help us if you can. Thank you to everybody who got involved in the show today. I don't have time, unfortunately, to read out your WhatsApps and play your WhatsApp messages. I know there's loads of them there, but we just don't have time. We're going way over time. We should talk to you again tomorrow at 12. But thank you to everybody who got involved. Until then, have a great day.
The multi-award-winning Niall Boylan Podcast. Listen live on Facebook, YouTube, and all the usual live stream services. To get in touch, just WhatsApp or text 085 100 2255. The Niall Boylan Podcast. They told me to shut up. Available for download from all your usual platforms.